I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes, and we're going to shift gears a little bit. And in the spirit of this hearing, in full disclosure, the Open Data Act that I'm going to ask some questions about is actually legislation Representative Derek Kilmer and I are authoring and will be reintroducing later on in this Congress. And as I'm sure you've heard, it's the legislation that basically by default makes government information public. We want it out in an open source, easily accessible, machine-readable format. You know, Americans' tax dollars went to create this data. The American people ought to have easy access to this data. And with the state of innovation going on in the tech community and actually all throughout the world today, we have no idea what information we'll be able to glean out of this, how the government might be able to save money, what new inventions might be coming, what scientific advances may happen. But I do want to be open-minded on this and ask an open question to the entire panel. Do you guys see any problems with this bill or anything that needs to be added to it to make it better? And I tell you what, since I'm sure Mr. Hollister has the longest answer to this, we'll go in the other direction and start with Mr. Painter.
It's a very sound bill. Yes, there are things I'd like to add to it. I would like the White House visitors log, including, as I say, Jackson Place, what's going on over there, the federal agencies. We ought to know who's going in and out of the federal agencies and lobbying. When the campaign contributors are making their pitch, there ought to be a lot more information about those types of contacts and also members of Congress. There's a health care bill that's going to be voted on later today. There are a lot of people in my district, the 2nd in Minnesota, who feel strongly that that bill isn't going to give them anything other than take away their health insurance. We'd at least like to know who is talking to our Congressman, Jason Lewis, about that bill. So I'm sure that members of your districts would like to know who's coming in and out and talking about that health care bill that's going to have such a dramatic impact on their lives. So I think there ought to be more disclosure about what's going on in government that will extend over to Congress as well as to the executive branch. But this bill is an excellent start.
Great. Mr. Fitton.
Oh, I can have come up with all sorts of amendments along the lines as Mr. Painter suggested, but I don't have any comments specifically on the initial bill.
All right. And listen, if y'all want to submit those in writing at some point, I certainly would be open to hearing what they are.
Thank you.
Mr. Bernardi? I'm sorry, I mispronounced your name. Could you?
Burlaw. Everybody does.
Burlaw.
It's an excellent bill, and I like that it makes the data user-friendly. That data can be of no use when it's just in a data dump, and you can't separate the wheat from the chaff, to use the analogy. But that it makes it user-friendly and accessible so the taxpayers can focus in on what governments are doing. But again, I think there are more things Congress can do. The Financial Stability Oversight Council, which has almost as much power as the Fed in terms of deciding whether a financial firm is too big to fail, which can both adversely affect the firm with more regulation and as well as give it advantage it by giving it saying the government would bail it out, and yet we don't know anything about those deliberations. So that agency, like the Fed, needs to be made less secrecy, and we need to investigate why in the world there was executive privilege claimed with regard to going beyond FOIA, an actual lawsuit in the discovery process in Fannie Mae. So those other abuses as far as secrecy need to be addressed.
Don't want to run out of time. I want to give everybody a chance. Mr. Singleton?
From what I know of the bill, I don't have any problems with it. As a former congressional staffer, I do think that there might be some concerns with making information about congressional schedules and particularly what constituents they meet with, contrary to, I'm going to call it a conspiracy theory that Mr. Painter seemed to be painting here. Not everyone that you meet with in Congress is some evil lobbyist that's going to line your pockets. A lot of time it is average citizens exercising their First Amendment rights to petition their government, and I don't know if we need to violate the confidentiality of their meetings in order to have a more transparent government.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hollister.
Mr. Farenthold, I think your bill is wise because it makes a distinction between operations and deliberations. If we were to mandate that the Jackson Place logs be made public, as Mr. Painter's recommending, wouldn't everybody just move across the street to Pete's Coffee? By making that distinction, which is what the FOIA makes, we focus on the decisions and the operations of the federal government, and that's where you'll find the really valuable transparency. Mr. Berlau talked about transparency of the Financial Stability Oversight Council. Well, separately, the Financial Transparency Act, which we thank you for co-sponsoring, would require the agencies of the Financial Stability Oversight Council, specifically by amending their statutes, to adopt standardized data formats for all the things that they do. Sometimes there's a need to focus in on a particular area like financial regulation, which is what that bill does. But I have no changes to recommend for the Open Government Data Act because it sets that foundation.
Thank you very much. I see my time has expired. We'll now recognize the gentleman from California.